Tanya Darden. I am the Communications Chair for the Management Faculty of Color Association. I'm here with Daniel Milner. Daniel is the new treasurer of the MFCA. He is an assistant professor at Oklahoma State University. And so we just wanted to take a minute to allow you an opportunity to get to know Daniel a little bit better. So Daniel, I'm going to start off with the first, kind of obvious question. How did it come about that you began pursuing your PhD, and how did you end up where you are today?
Yeah, so my PhD journey sort of starts in two parallel tracks. One based on myself as an individual and one more family background. So the shorter one is family, so I'll just talk about that first. My dad has a PhD in math. He's toward the end of his career at Arizona State University. So, I grew up hearing about his stories as a professor, saw him travel a lot. So that example was always there for me as a viable career path. Then with that background sort of comes in the question of, well, how did I get to where I am? What did I do? And that is something that I think has more to do with my track in my institutions post high school. So I went to business school at Wharton. I did not really enjoy business school until I took my core intro management class the first semester of my junior year after I'd taken all my other core, especially quant classes. And that intro management class was the first time I finally took a business class that I enjoyed. So that to me was a signal of, okay, so if there's a part of business I like to study, it's the more people side of things than the numbers or economics of it. So I joined the OB professors at Wharton as a research assistant. Then my junior year internship, which at Wharton is a whole thing, everyone going for finance or consulting internships. I stayed at Penn's campus and worked as an RA for Katie Milkman, who's a behavioral scientist. She's famous for work on nudges, the fresh start effect. Her most recent book is How to Change. So again, very micro for me, which, jumping ahead a little bit, is what I applied to grad school for on the behavioral economics, a little positive psychology side of things. I found out very soon into grad school at Kellogg that it would be difficult to finish my degree if I stayed along that path. So I did a pretty big about face from more micro topics to more macro topics on especially economic development and grounded more in sociology. I actually never took any sociology classes before grad school, but in my heart of hearts, that's really what I identify as a sociologist, and specifically an organizational sociologist. So, I did my PhD on, the title is Institutional Logics and Economic Development in Latin America. So very high level, not precise title, but looking at how sort of public discourse surrounding economic market reforms in two Latin American countries in the oil industries of Argentina and Mexico shaped the reforms. So not looking at the dollars and cents economics of the reforms, but more the cultural, social side of things.
That sounds cool. I'll ask you this question. And it's a little off what we talked about. But that does sound like a very cool dissertation. Do you love it, or are you like, I don't want to think about it anymore?
Definitely the second answer.
Yeah.
I want nothing to do with it anymore. I know we're recording, so you can decide what to do with this part, but like grad school was a tough experience for me.
Yeah.
Just especially on the mental health front, it
Uh-huh.
was a really challenging time. And without exaggerating too much, I think grad school was a bit of a trauma for me. So,
I don't
and the
think you're alone
dissertation,
there.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that's something not in that doesn't get enough attention or people talking about it. So to answer your question, do I want to forget about it? Yes, in terms of not actively pursuing it for publication and development. I still find value in it for, sharing my experience with others and saying, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And then once you reach the end of the tunnel, once you finish and defend the dissertation, it's a new turning point, a
Yes.
critical juncture, if you will, of what to do with it. So this semester, actually, I did, not with my dissertation, but with my master's thesis. So earlier in in grad school, I had set the goal before the semester started to revise it and send it out for review by the end of this current semester. And yeah, that just was not feasible. So I ended up dropping the project, or not dropping it, but indefinitely putting it on the back burner and not letting it was spilling over into being able to work on other projects. It was spilling over in personal life. And that's, I think, where that idea of a trauma can come in, right? Is it affects you in ways beyond the original incidents of the event that causes that response. And I need, for my well-being, I needed to put some sort of boundary, some limit around how much I was going to let this particular aspect of my work affect me. And, it was a tough decision. It was by far the project I had most progress in and was closest to being sent out for review. But since then, and this is only a few weeks ago, I feel so much more empowered and engaged with my work. It's fall, so thinking ahead to conference application season in January. It's been a while since I've been this excited to work on projects and get ideas off the ground in ways that move me in a nice way. They don't just, I don't dread them, right? I'm not avoiding or wanting to not work on something. It's quite the opposite. It's, oh, I get to work on this today. How exciting.
Yeah. That's a great segue. So what's the project that you're working on now that excites you the most?
Yeah, so I've got a few things going on. So one is the most empirical project is looking at as a context, the rowing team at Oklahoma State. So looking at that, we're doing a mixed method study with some of my collaborators who are in the OB group at OSU. I'm technically in the strategic management group. I don't do strategy research, but it's basically our catch-all label for macro research.
Yeah.
So I'm coming at it from a more macro lens, but within the macro, I'm coming at it from a very micro lens. There's a subfield of sociology called micro sociology.
Okay.
That instead of looking at the main unit of analysis at the level of societies or countries, those sort of really big macro level units, micro sociology takes the group as the unit of analysis. So, some famous micro-sociological studies looked at teams of doctors or medical practitioners. Some look at Little League baseball teams in the US or professional kitchens. So not specifically work contexts necessarily, and certainly not from the management prerogative of looking to optimize or maximize efficiency or effectiveness, but from a more, to the extent neutrality is a thing in social research, from a less preconceived normative view of what a group ought to or can do for its members.
Yeah.
So that's exciting because it lets me bring in my background as a qualitative researcher, but also as taking a step back, I in general work infinitely better in collaborations than individually. I think that was part of the reason I struggled so much with my dissertation also, was it being an individual project. That being able to collaborate with folks, and especially with their OB backgrounds, we're able to communicate with each other about the same issues. You know, we're both looking at the same athletes, the same rowing team, the same organizational structure. And maybe I'm coming at it from a more qualitative sociological lens, while my co-authors are coming from a more quant or applied OB lens.
Yeah.
But we recognize we're seeing different aspects of the same phenomenon. So I find it a really enriching process and I think my co-authors would say the same thing.
Yeah, that is really cool. And not, you know, we're, like you said, we're always looking at things from I always look at things from a corporate lens, or but not taking advantage of the rowing team as a group is interesting in itself. So I excited for your project, and eager to, I'm sure it'll get published somewhere really well. So eager to read that. So we talked a little bit about what is exciting you in your work. What gives you, what are you passionate about in your private life?
Yeah. So recently things I should say two are the big ones that I dedicate attention to outside of work. So one is cooking and the other is music. So cooking, I grew up basically by my mom. My parents divorced when I was young, so shuttling back and forth between parents, but we almost always had home cooked meals. So I remember a lot of time spent as a kid standing over the stove or at the counter chopping vegetables, sort of being the sous chef, the number 2 cook in the kitchen. And that's something I really cherish because it set me up to appreciate the variety and diversity of palates and cuisines, not just around the world, but even within a country. The US, people say, what's typical American food? That's impossible to answer.
Right,
it's so regional. It's so dependent on the community or, neighborhood even varies so much. So I've been in Oklahoma about 1.5 years now. So I've been trying to pick up some local influences. So things like Oklahoma, I would characterize jokingly as not easily labeled in terms of region. It's not quite South, it's not quite Midwest, it's not quite Southwest, it's definitely not Texas. But it's still got influences of all those more readily identified geographies. And those influences permeate in a little bit. So recently I've been cooking a lot, or trying to cook, watching YouTube videos, reading blogs and stuff of Creole and Cajun food. So more, I guess, Louisiana based than Oklahoma, but I'm learning to see similarities across, seasonings or herbs and spices as things maybe that are used in New Orleans or in Louisiana that maybe don't make it to Oklahoma. That sort of mindset is like a microcosm of how I see cooking generally, because I've been practicing with Creole food, Cajun food, but I'm also practicing with Indian food, Indian subcontinent. So I've got my spices from admittedly a corporate American grocer, so not like the most I do need to check out the Indian grocer in Tulsa, because I know that would be an experience just to see the variety of ingredients there. But like I said, I've got cookbooks, bloggers, YouTube videos I watch. So I see cooking is one of my big passions there. I think what I like most about it is being able to share then with friends or even folks I don't know too well. So, next week is Thanksgiving in the US. So in grad school, that was one thing I did a lot, was host Thanksgiving. I'd cook the turkey. I would cook a whole meal and then just ask everyone to bring a dish to share. So that's something I'll look forward to next week with my family, for instance.
Yeah.
Then the second thing that I'm passionate about is music. I grew up playing cello in my school orchestras. I'm part of the Tulsa People's Orchestra here in Tulsa, which is all amateur. Folks, some are pros. I mean, they have day jobs doing things, but we rehearse in the evenings or on the weekend mostly, so this isn't their main thing. But what's nice in the fall is instead of playing as the full symphony orchestra, we play by instruments. So right now I'm part of my cello choir, it's called. So for our music, it's mostly divided into 4 voices, we usually call it, which is a misnomer because, an instrument doesn't sing in the human voice sense. So we have our strongest players usually playing voice 1 or voice 2. I'm playing voice 3. With a little practice, more than a little, I think I could make it up to second voice, but I'm more than happy just being a part of the group, contributing my line, commenting. It's a nice break from the more analytical side of things that academia is completely about.
Right.
And get to use the more artistic and creative sides of my brain with music and cooking.
Yeah, that's so cool. What's your go-to dish?
So my go-to dish is dal, which is Indian lentils, very generically. One thing I learned fairly early on is in traditional Indian cooking, there's nothing that's called curry. That's a totally British invention. The idea of a curry. There is a leaf called the curry leaf that provides a very distinctive flavor. But in the way that often US language, English uses curry to mean any sort of saucy meat or vegetable dish with many spices, that's not really a thing. So the dal I do is with lentils. I heat up oil with some spices like cinnamon, cloves, bay leaf, to seep the flavors into the oil. Remove those, add some garlic or ginger, add some seeds like cumin, mustard, fennel, add some onion, then usually some vegetable. Tomato is often a good one to get a base flavor. Let that cook. And only then do I add the lentils. And usually I try to use some homemade veggie broth that I try to make every week or two to, just give it a little more flavor. And that dish, I can't make any claim to its authenticity of how, a family in India or even immigrants to the US from India would find it, but I think it's pretty tasty how I make it.
Very cool. Last question as we wrap up. So you're very, you're into music, cello, cooking. But if I asked you right now, what's the number 1 played song on your playlist? What's that gonna be?
Number 1 song is the song Lazy Eye by a band called Silver Sun Pickups. And I don't know what it is about that song that makes you feel nostalgic, but in that hopeful late adolescent, young adulthood sense of, the world is your oyster. Things may bring you down, but you'll get through them if, you know, with hope and thinking that, you know, just because the present moment may not be as good as you want it, it gets you going. That song is probably my number one, but Spotify, eerily enough, has me trained, or the algorithm has me trained, where if I say, ask my Google Home to play that song, then the following 6 songs are exactly the ones I want to hear. And it's eerie because some of them I don't even know the titles of, but they just fit so well in the order of my mood and how the previous songs have been going, that I do have to give them credit that the algorithm can figure us out a little bit at least.
Very cool. Look, Daniel, thank you so much. It has been great to get to know you. We've been in a few meetings together on the exec board, but this definitely gives me different insight into who you are, and I'm sure our members as well will enjoy getting to know you as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tanya, for setting this up. It's been wonderful working with you through the executive board already, and I'm excited to know that, you know, this might be an opportunity for some of our members to get to know me also.
Yeah, great. We'll put this up, and I'm sure everybody will enjoy it. Have a good one.
Thank you. Take care.
And